Educated Economist here. Let me get the dice up. Gotta have the dice, right? So, left a few links down in the description for you guys talking about the home builders, or at least the home building market right now. For those of you who don't know, I do retail sales at a lumber yard. I have been pretty much following the lumber market for quite a few years now. Kind of got me somewhat popular here on YouTube for being able to call out the lumber market as accurately as I was, simply from the position that I was in. Like, I could see things in a way that not a lot of people could find, having access to mills, distributors, wholesalers, the retail market. And then also I live in the middle of like the Pacific Northwest. Well, I live out on the coast, but still in the Pacific Northwest, this is considered timber country. Like, the name of the mascot for the local high school where I live is the loggers, right? So this is how prevalent like logging is in our area, is that the mascot, like, and we're not the only ones. There's other people who have loggers for their mascot as well. So very interesting thing taking place within the home builders right now. The home builders are doing quite well. Like, look at some of the commercial builders out there. Their stock is doing so much better than it ever has. I mean, it's come off a little bit. Like, I think I left it down there for DR Horton. There's a link down to their stock, and you can see it's come off a little bit from their all-time highs, but still, considering where they, where the stock has been in the past, it is like incredibly high value to it right now. And this is something that I almost predicted. Like, I didn't really call it out, but I had said that, a few years ago, or as we started moving into the interest rates, the higher interest rates, and everybody was under the impression that we were going to have this like huge real estate crash, not a lot of people were taking out permits to build. Like, a lot of people were saying, man, there's going to be this housing market crash. But then if you look at the building permit issuance, it's actually doing pretty well, like almost where it was at pre-COVID. So like, there was no slowdown that ever took place, except for the brief moment when the lockdowns took place and nobody was building. The permit issuance fell, but then it dramatically risen, and here we are like in the same spot that we were prior to the pandemic. So the builders are still going. Right? The builders are still going strong. And I thought about that. It was just like, man, if there wasn't a shortage of housing before the pandemic, there is still a shortage of housing that has taken place due to the fact that the new inventory is not coming on in a substantial way. Like, how do you get new inventory? Either somebody has to leave the house or sell the house, or you have to build a new one, right? And this is really where I see like the shortage comes from, the new building that has taken place. Like, if you could imagine, and this is something that I've said before, if you could imagine going back to like the 80s or even earlier than that, and think about what some of the people were saying back then. I'm going to build my own home. Like, literally piece together their own home with their own two hands. Very rarely does anybody even consider this nowadays. Now, I'm not saying that it doesn't happen. There are plenty of people who do build their own homes. But for the most part, you're not going to be a guy who works at a regular job who happens to have a piece of land and being able to stop at the hardware store or the lumber yard on the way home and piece together a house over the course of a summer. It just simply doesn't work that way anymore. So now you have to really hire somebody to build a home, or really know quite extensively all the process that it would take in order to construct one of these modern day homes, which is much different from what they had built back in the 80s and prior to that. So the fact that people just simply aren't building their own home, like literally putting a kit together, like for the most part, this is keeping people from being able to build their own home and then adding inventory to the market. So now it's just reliant on the home builders to build homes to add for inventory coming into the market. Now, here's the funny thing about new homes that come onto the market, is that even talking with a lot of the builders around here, or the ones that I work with, I even ask them, how come you don't build affordable homes? Like, how come you don't build a house that's gonna, be for like a starter family home, right? And they all have the same reply. There's no margin in it. Like, you literally cannot profit off of building an inexpensive home. They have to build the most expensive home they can that's going to sell, because that's where the profit margin is. They can't make it up in the time or how quickly they can sell this home if it's selling for a very low price. So they have to build a nice home, way more expensive than what the typical average starter home would be. And this is where the margins are for most of the builders. Now, I'm not saying that's across the board, but that's definitely the case in my area, and I'd imagine that that's probably the case for a lot of people out there. So this is another reason why we don't see the inventory build up like we would anticipate when you have such high values for homes, is that, you know, most people would think, man, if these homes are selling for such an expensive price, I want to bring inventory to the market and take advantage of that. But however, you have to build this really expensive home in order to get the margin. It doesn't give you the ability to just go out there and just start slamming out a bunch of houses. You know what I mean? Like if you have a tract home where every house is basically the same plan, or maybe reversed, you got a few of them, and you knock them out cookie cutter as fast as you can. Even if you were to provide a situation of that sort, it doesn't profit in the way that it once had in the past, right? All the added costs from labor, permitting, building cost, everything that goes into it now means that the house has to have a higher value to it in order to make up the loss of margin that you get. So this is pretty much the case that's going across, you know, what I see, probably going across the board. Now, here's something really interesting to think about as far as the crash goes, right, for housing, is that the majority of homes, not the majority, a good majority of homes, there we go, like a third of them are being sold to all cash buyers. Think about that. They don't care where the interest rates are. This is something very interesting to think about, because people say once the interest rates rise, the house prices are going to come down. But if cash buyers can care less where the interest rates are and they're still buying at this price, guess what? This is where the price is going to be. Now, yes, it can come down, and yes, if you have a bunch of rising unemployment, you might have some issues with inventory buildup, but it's not significant, and I don't see that happening. I don't see it in my area. I don't see it happening in the news. I don't see it happening out there when it comes to like this major rise in inventory for the new residential or even existing residential homes. Now, commercial, on the other hand, is a huge difference, right? Like everybody says the commercial real estate is going to end up dragging into the residential. Very well could. I don't see it happening. Like I don't see that's to be the case. What I see the case being is that new homes are being constructed in a pace that is almost as high as it was prior to the pandemic. All right? That's what I see happening right now. And I don't see where it is that there's going to be a crash in home prices coming into the future, unless there's something significant like unemployment rising to the point that people can no longer make the payments on their house. See, everybody said once the inflation rises, then people won't be able to afford the payments on their house. That didn't happen either, right? So, I mean, so far, I mean, could it? Sure, why not, right? I mean, anything is possible going into the future. But what I see happening is not the case in which that people are going to end up losing their job, failing to make the payment, and then having to foreclose on that house. For the most part, the house prices haven't come down so significantly that they wouldn't be able to just sell that house off. Right? Like, why not? Right? So this is the case that I see coming across like the building industry, is that the building aspect of things, like the strength of the builders, seems to be getting stronger. Right? Which means that the crash that everybody is anticipating probably isn't going to be as likely as they had thought that it was going to be once the interest rates started to move up. Does all that make sense? I don't know. That's just my feelings of it when I decided to make this video when I came out today. So anyway, what are your guys' thoughts? Any questions or comments? Hi, yo, all right, UE. Hey, where do I have any glasses in here? Shoot, I left my glasses. I left my glasses inside. Well, I think I can. All-nighter, hey, right on, pothead with the thumbs up. Yo, UE, what it be, buddy? It's going good, man. Thanks for being here, Rich. All right, hit the like button. Yes, definitely hit the like button. Calling a liked lunchtime chat, wiring up lights in a camera shop north of Sacramento here. Right on, man. Glad to hear you working. There's a shortage of housing in the rural area. People are leaving the cities. Yeah, and I totally agree with that. Like, that's one of the things that I saw really drove the prices up here in my area, is that a lot of remote workers, people who were living in Portland, wanted to get out of the nastiness of Portland or the condense or the COVID, whatever. Like, they just wanted to get out of the city. Astoria is a beautiful, safe, clean, friendly, nice place to be. Right? And when all those people sold their houses or moved out of Portland or California or whatever, and they came up here, the house prices just went through the roof. And there's a limited amount of expansion. I mean, Astoria is a peninsula, right? I mean, it can only go so far, and then you can start moving east with it. And that's actually the area that I live, is east of Astoria, where there's a lot more room. But Astoria itself is very limited. So if you want to live in Astoria, there's only so much room that it can expand, and it's pretty much left to the existing homes that are here. Boom, up goes the price. And that's really what I'm experiencing here. And it's like the hospital district is growing quite large. Like, our hospital district is far bigger than what needs to be to support just the Astoria area. It's supporting a big chunk of this whole region, like, within many miles, I don't know how much the radius that it's covering, but the hospital district is quite huge. So to me, this is turning into much more of a retirement community up here. You can see it not only with the new people, the influx of new residents who are here, but I see it down at the lumber yard. Like, people come in to work on their homes. I'm from a city that is like 200 years old, right? So these houses here are pretty much in a constant state of disrepairs, considering it's the Pacific Northwest, really bad weather most of the time. These things have to constantly be worked on. And somebody who's moving up from California, who maybe, like, had a profession down there where they had an expensive home, they sold their $2 million home, came up here, bought a $500,000 home, and now working on this home is very difficult for them because, one, it's an old house and they may not be used to doing that. Now, there are a lot of people who know how to work on their home and they do that, but I see it. They come in and they say, hey, I've recently moved here. I need a carpenter. Do you know anybody who works on homes? Well, of course I do. But there's so few of them around here anymore, and they're booked out so far. I don't know who it is that you're going to be able to get to work on your house. And this is really a problem that is starting to be created here in our area, as the influx of retirees is now driving out the working class. It's like, well, I mean, ultimately, it's a gentrification that is happening here, but you can really see it through the Cantillon effect as well. So, all right. E.T. Builder, go home. My grandma was a carpenter, or grandpa, I'm sorry. My grandpa was a carpenter and helped my dad add a second floor to my childhood home. That was back in the 80s, though, Building is happening just slow. Why? Why isn't it possible to buy a plot and build your own home over the summer after work? What economic factors change this? It's not an economics factor. I think it's building permit. Like, I'm not saying you can't. Like, there's, like, I could do it. Like, I know I could do it. I'm sure Old Nighter could do it. There's a lot of people who can. But the way that homes are constructed now, usually the biggest issue that comes with it is the speed in which that it needs to be done, right? And then the amount of, like, I'm not saying that it can't be done. It can very well be done. It's just that very few people do it that way, right? And the way that a home was constructed back in the early 80s didn't have nearly as much, like, code requirements to it, didn't have as much, like, there's a lot of specialty kind of applications that come to building a home nowadays that isn't quite what it once was, as far as, like, the style in which it is actually constructed. And I'm not trying to say, like, it's so complicated that an individual who doesn't have, like, carpentry skills or something couldn't do it. Yeah, you could absolutely do it. But it's a lot more complicated nowadays than it once was. And again, with, like, the speed in which you have to complete this thing, usually having, like, subcontractors and, time crunches and stuff like that, it's not very prevalent, is all I guess I should say. There was a time when people would plan to do it like that. It's not like, I don't know anybody, like, right now, like, out of all the houses that I know that are going on, where somebody is actually building their own home to live in that isn't already a carpenter. You see where I'm kind of getting at? Is it's like the average person who works at the gas station isn't doing it. Yeah, and that's something that was possible and very prevalent back in the 80s and earlier. People would do that. That was a thing. Like, people did it, And so I'm not saying they can't do it. I'm just saying they don't. And that's one of the reasons why it's happening, or the lack of new inventory coming. It's unaffordable to build affordable homes. That's right. But remember, payment greater than price. All nighter greetings. Hi, everyone. What about Canada homes? I don't know. I don't follow the Canadian market as much. Like, I would leave that to Mike Martins. I mean, I think that dude probably has his finger on the Canadian market better than just about anybody. So if you're looking for somebody out there who's talking Canadian market, the housing market, I would definitely follow Mike Martins, Mike in the Night. I feel like a jumbo jack landlord's course. I feel like the course is overpaid and does not work. Well, Jay, I guess that's a matter of opinion. I used to sell mobile home. Banks wanted me to pay half of all loans up front and give them amnesty on renting. It was no bueno. Either one or the other. Profit was all in my renting that way. I had to buy an entire home myself, no loans, to see real gains from so called affordable housing. Hi, Simon from England. Hello, S. All right, cash buyers benefit from no PMI and minimal no interest payments. This is huge advantage over people who had to take a mortgage. Yeah, I totally agree with you, Jason, and that's like, that's just the unfortunate situation that it's now in. And a lot of people want to blame like particular, I don't know, maybe just put blame around. But really, if you look at it, this is part of Cantion's essay. I mean, this is something that he had talked about, that when the new money comes into the system and starts separating the rich from the poor, you know that there's an abundance of money in the system by the prices of leases and rents and housing. Like, so ultimately, if housing is very expensive and everybody's talking about how expensive it is comparatively to how much they earn, so to speak, that would be like Cantillon saying there is an abundance of money within the system. Well, what this ends up doing is that it separates the rich and the poor from being able to have a home, right? So like, you think about it, back in the day in the 50s, people had a home. Like people could construct a home, live in a house. That's the way they were going about it. Like it wasn't some ungodly dream or unachievable dream to buy a house. Like that was something that would be almost expected of you if you had a regular job, even just a regular day job, 9 to 5er, is that you were almost expected that, yeah, at some point you would be buying a home. Right? But that's not really the case nowadays. Even though we have all these people working, the chances of them getting into a house is pretty low. There's only a limited amount of homes, and there's all these people out there who want to get into one. So, as far as like the availability of homes, it's really only going to be for people who have money or have access to money or have access to that new money or are doing something very creative and strategic in order to get into a house, doing house hacking kind of things, or teaming up with other people. But as far as like the individual, hey, I'm going to go and work real hard at my day job, save up a bunch of money, and then be able to buy a house, that is fading away. Like you could probably find some places in the country you can do it. I can't do it here in Astoria. Like my regular job, my wife's regular job was not going to be enough for us to buy a home here in Astoria. Just wasn't going to happen. I had to have all the supplemental income or the secondary incomes and everything else that I got going in. And even that was still barely enough for me to be able to take out a loan here in my local area. So yeah, if you like, this is the case that is going to keep growing across the nation. I don't see any reversal to that. I had a call. I'm back, catching up 2 times. All right. Hey, everyone. Thank God it's Friday. Yes, absolutely. Simon, just look at population graph. It's growing at multiplying rate. Thousands of houses are being built in Central Florida. Locals can't afford it. It's all snowbirds and retirees. Very sad. Well, it's just the case. Like, I mean, you know, there's no reversing the separation between the rich and the poor. Like the reversing of it is going to be so much more painful than nobody's ever going to like vote for anybody who's going to do the right decision and make it better, right? So it's only going to get worse as far as new money coming into the system, and it's going to separate the rich from the poor even more. It's going to make it even more difficult to get a house and raise a family and do all the other things here in our country. It's just the unfortunate way it's going to go about it. And as much as we would love to wish or hope and pray that there's somebody out there who can actually create a situation that's going to be a benefit to the people, like where houses become more affordable or inventory builds or something like that, isn't going to happen. There's no politician out there who can make a situation change like that. And even if they did, the pain that people would experience from it would pretty much have him fired right away. So there's just like, This is something that you have to adapt to, realize what's going on, and then start to do things more in a strategic fashion in order to acquire those homes. The idea that, there's going to be this huge crash and you're going to be able to jump into the housing market once there's a crash, that's I mean, it's possible. But you might be sitting around waiting for a very long time. When I bought my house, people said next year you're going to be crying. And then when that happened and, the next year came along and I had a value of my house was off the charts, people said, oh, just give it another year and you're going to be crying. Well, here it is. It's another year later, still waiting for that moment to cry. I thought I was going to be there. When I bought the house, I thought for sure the price of the house was going to go down. I was going to be underwater, all the stuff. Like, I thought the same thing as everybody else, right? All the people out there. I was very much in line thinking that very same thing. I pulled the trigger on the house. I didn't want to. It was one of the hardest things that I had ever done. And I am so glad I did, man. I got little over 3% interest on that home. The idea of trying to even buy it today at the price that I did, I would not be able to afford the payments considering the interest rates have gone up. So I couldn't even really buy the house that I'm in right now. Like, I couldn't do it. The conditions have become that much more harder for getting into a home. And the price is still more than what I had paid for it, right? The estimated value of it. So it's not going the direction that people thought it would. I mean, we could sit around and waiting for it to still happen, and it very well could, but I don't see it. All right, I'm currently getting through the permit process. I'm putting one up in the summer. I hope lumber prices stay sane. I think, as far as what I can tell, I think you're going to be okay on lumber prices at least into the summer. Now, depending on how much building begins to take place from here, like if we all of a sudden just have this like massive spike in building for whatever reason, like, interest rates drop and everybody decides that they're going to start, building a home or something. It would have to be like some sort of condition of that they would start driving the prices up, like pretty much what the builders and distributors and wholesalers, everybody out there would then start moving into the lumber futures market, driving up the price, trying to get prepared to have the inventory on hand to deal with that boom of building that is going to take place. But that's not something I really see happening right now. One of the major issues with lumber, and a lot of people don't look at this, is the retail side of things. Like, everybody looks at the builders and then says, wow, if the builders are going, then lumber's going to go. But there's a whole other market for lumber that's beyond the builders, like beyond just building a house. People like retail. Customers come down, they're looking to build shelves in the garage, maybe build a woodshed in the back, a chicken coop. They're just doing things that are not necessarily the construction of a home, but yet they still want the lumber for whatever projects they're working on, right? And so there's a demand for lumber that's beyond the builders that a lot of people just don't even know. Like, there's no index that you can go to say, hey, here's the retail demand for lumber. It doesn't quite look like that. You can see builder demand through permit issuance, but you can't really see the retail side of things. And that's one of the things that I get to experience as far as a retailer of lumber working at a hardware store, is I get to see how many people are actually coming in working on their home projects. And now, because I have access to that just from visually being there and being in the game of it, now I have a better understanding of how much demand for lumber is going to occur outside of the builders. Right? That's a huge thing. Like, not a lot of people get to see that, and unless you are actually physically working at a lumber yard or something, that's probably something that you're not going to get a whole lot of like information or data on. Me seeing the retail side as slow as it is doesn't give me a whole lot of concern about lumber prices moving up, even if the permit issuance were to move up. If retail stays low like it has been, then I would imagine that the lumber prices are going to stay fairly low. It might, like if there was a jump in permit issuance or something, it might spark the idea of getting into the futures to be prepared for that, but I think that would be a short-lived spike, okay? Now, so bottom line is that I really don't see lumber moving up in price as far as comparatively to where we are today, where we were prior to the pandemic, and the demand for retail being as low as it is, unless there's some sort of stimulus check that goes out there, or for some reason the retail side would decide that they wanted to come in and start buying up lumber, which I just don't think is going to happen. Most past projects and future projects were pulled into the COVID era and have been completed. So it's probably going to be some time before we start seeing like the retail side moving back into the lumber market and then start creating like that demand or that higher demand for lumber. I don't know. Does all that kind of make sense? It's not something a lot of people consider. Like nobody really looks like you're not going to find analysts or news articles or data talking about lumber demand from the retail side. They will talk about lumber demand from the building side of things, from the home builders or, new construction in general. But very rarely are you going to find any kind of information talking about the retail side. You would have to have the anecdotal evidence, to actually have to see that part of things. All right, how long are we into? It's 25 minutes. I have about another 5-10 minutes that we can go here, and then we'll have to call it a day on this one. What are lumber futures going to be near summer? You think it will be good? Thanks. Like I said, I just kind of went over that. I feel lumber prices are probably going to remain low. And here's the thing, guys. Like the lumber futures have a delay to it, right? So if lumber futures spike, it will reflect back into the retail, but it's going to take a little bit of time for it to really happen. Now, granted, most of the time when that lumber futures moves up, it moves up dramatically. It doesn't take very long behind that for retail to start moving up as well. Soon as the competition has to raise their price because they've purchased into the new lumber, well, then the people who are sitting on cheap lumber will elevate their price too, because that's the way competition works. If the competition is going to sell it for a higher price, then you're going to sell it for a higher price, right? But usually it's just below that. So as the lumber futures move up, that's your opportunity to say, okay, man, I need to jump in before this happens. And you check. You have to check many different lumber yards to make sure who it is that's going to have the cheaper package. Those who run through a lot of lumber, like, man, they are just pumping it out there. They bring in trucks, out trucks, in trucks, out trucks. They're a lot more sensitive to that futures price because of how quickly they are purchasing it to that futures move. Now, if you have a lumber yard that's like, they do some stuff, but they sit on their lumber for a lot longer than, say, another outfit that's turning over quite quickly, their lumber prices may be a lot more stable and steady over the course of that lumber futures rising, as they have to really wait to get cheaper lumber or more expensive lumber in before they adjust their price. Does that kind of make sense? So if you happen to be in an area that has a lumber supplier that is just ripping through lumber really fast, their prices might fluctuate quite quickly. So if you see the lumber futures move, you might want to run down there and get your lumber right away, especially if you see the lumber futures moving up dramatically before they have a chance to get that new lumber in that's going to be more expensive. But if you see like, an area that is pretty slow and you see the lumber futures move, you could probably take your time a little bit to just, as far as you wouldn't have to want to run down there that week and get it or get your supply before the prices move. So you might have just a slight more opportunity to take advantage of that time delay before the futures price start to reflecting the retail side of things. This is hard strategy because you got to really understand your supplier, right? It's different for everybody. Some people ask me like, how long does it take for the futures to impact the retail? It's really relative. I mean, it just from like the things that I have said there. But anyway, moving on here. My girlfriend had to wait 8 months for approval on a permit in an apartment. Yeah, good afternoon, my uneducated peeps. Good afternoon, Wayne. So maybe I should shift my business up north, get spoon-fed work referrals from Simon. Yeah, you probably could. I mean, there's a demand for it up here. Boom, let's piss. Oh, Benny's up in the house. All right. Naturally higher time for a load to secured into the north. Okay. Hey, Brody. All right. Is it typically more worthwhile to have a professional outfit build a house for you than it would be to build your own with a few skilled friends, even if you know what you are doing? I mean, if that's the case, if you have a few skilled friends and they're committed to your project and they're going to be there for you, then yeah, I would say, do it that way because you're going to save an insane amount of money going about that route. However, if it's something that if it's not something that you have guaranteed help and labor and all that other stuff, I mean, I don't know. Like to me, I think like having somebody else build your house who's, definitely knows what they're doing is probably going to build you a good quality home, right? It, there's shoddy builders out there. I mean, there's people who have constructed brand new homes that were absolute crap. Like crap. And just because they went through the inspection process doesn't mean that they didn't do shoddy work in constructing this home. There's a lot of stuff that the inspector just isn't going to see. They're looking to make sure that the brackets and the hold downs and the nail patterns and everything else are good, but they don't necessarily watch and see how well you might have sealed a window in, like, caulked it in for the weather. They don't see how, like, shoddy the craftsmanship of the actual construction of the house can be. So just paying somebody to build a house doesn't necessarily make it better. You gotta find the right person. And that sometimes can be very difficult if you're not even aware of how, like, homes get constructed. I mean, you could be on the job site and they could be doing shoddy work and you may not even know it because you're just not familiar with how the construction goes together. Um, yeah, a friend that happens to be a girl. I know, crazy concept, having friends. All right. Boom. Let's cruise down here to the bottom because I'm going to have to call it quits here in just a second. I just want to read the last few comments before I turn the video off. Americans need to decrease starter home size. Market has rise with the Jones. It's not that the market needs to do that. It's just Americans can't need to do that. The economic conditions in which that we are in just doesn't allow it. It just simply doesn't allow it. Like, we can wish and hope and dream and want for cheaper homes to be built by the builders, but the builders need to be profitable in their endeavors, right? And it's just not profitable to do that. They have to build a more expensive home, which then takes a whole chunk of the people out of the game as far as their chances to get into one of these new homes. I mean, it's just the unfortunate consequences, but there's nobody you can vote for who's going to be able to change that without some major taxing of the people for subsidies or incentives or something out there. You can't lower interest rates and for a certain group of people to say, man, we need to get you into a house. Like, we needed to, for Americans who are disadvantaged or don't have the advantage to get into a house, if we lower interest rates, they can be able to make those payments going into a home. It doesn't provide more homes. Right? It doesn't matter if you can make the conditions available for them to be able to afford a home if there's simply just no homes there. Like, yeah, great, you can make the payments, but there's none. And the more that you give the availability of people to go and buy a home, the prices of homes continue to move up as the demand increases every time they lower the interest rates and bring in a whole bunch of people who would typically not be qualified for a home or all of a sudden qualified to buy a home. That's a huge demand. Demand, supply, demand. What happens? Prices move up anytime you have this, imbalance. If you had a hell of a lot more supply than demand, prices would go down. But every time they lower interest rates, trying to bring this incentive to people who can't afford homes to be able to afford homes, they create a bunch of demand to a limited supply and prices go up. It does the exact opposite of what it is that the intention is trying to do as far as bringing affordable homes or bringing the affordability to people to get into these expensive homes. It does the exact opposite and it drives home prices up even more. All right. I gotta quit it, guys. I love this topic and I would love to sit here and keep talking about home building and how it is that the distribution network and lumber sales and all that other stuff, because I know this is pretty good information for a lot of people out there, especially if you're in the new construction or real estate market. This is the type of topic that you don't really get a lot of out there amongst, like, the other YouTubers from this sort of view, like being in the supply chain itself and then giving you what it is that I see out there. But I feel coming into the summer that this is probably going to be a fairly big topic. As far as the lumber prices moving, I don't really see a whole lot of that happening here in the next few months, but I think there's going to be a lot of activity just taking place within the new construction market. And that's probably something that's going to be a pretty big topic here over the next few months that we should cover. All right, Uneducated Economist, you guys let me know. Let me just read the last few here. Oh, did we get Dion in the house? Dion, man, it's so good to see you up in here. Sorry, I got to call it quits here. I got to go back to work. Yes, corporate, get the out of the single families, all-nighter hider, or laughs, you can't blame me. All right. All right, home builders, such a long process. China is the only one who really mastered the process, building houses fast. I don't know. I mean, I'm going to just say this real quick and then I'm going to call it quits because I got to go. But we built a a team of guys. It was five of us. Five? Four of us. Sorry. There was four of us who built this home. Three of us were on it regularly. And then there was another guy who came in kind of like part time. And the three of us constructed a fairly good sized home. I believe it was around 2,200 square feet. It was 2 stories. Cedar shingle siding, really nice custom everything. Everything was done really nice, done really well. Um, and if I remember right, from the time that we stripped the forms off the foundation to the time that those people were like had a completed home, I think it was just slightly over 3 months. Right. And we knocked that thing out in record time. 3 months. It took us 90 days to construct that entire house. And it was a beautiful home, but it was our first project as a team together, and we were super motivated. Like, we hit this thing running hard. Like, we gave it like everything we had to get this first house done, because it was like pretty much the establishment and start of a new business, a new construction company. And so like we were all super motivated and young and hungry and eager and just slam this thing out. And even the homeowner was super impressed by it. Um, when we were all said and done, like, they came out and did an appraisal of the home, and it was like, I don't know, it came in like $100,000 more than what the guy had anticipated. He was just like absolutely super, super pumped up about like, just the project in general. And so, yeah, that took us 90 days, a little over 90 days. So it can happen fast, but that's not typical. Like, I think the next project we did took like, I don't know, 8 months or something. It was like, it kind of fell apart. But he didn't have as many people working on it as consistently as we did that first house. But anyway, I'm going to let it go at that. Uneducated Economist, you guys are awesome. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for hitting that like button. I'm going to give you a second here to go hit that like button another minute. It's 126 people with 53 likes. Go hit the like button right now. Get it up to about 100 before I end this, because I have no time left. I got to go back to work. Sorry, don't even have time for that. All right, Uneducated Economist, you guys let me know.